Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Paideiac Self podcast. I'm your host Ken, and today for this episode, I want to reflect on one of my biggest lessons that I've learned so far in my life, and that is that I can be myself without having to sacrifice my boundaries or sense of self in the process. For years, I used to be very desperate when it comes to friendships. For that, I would grab anyone along my way that opened their arms to me, just as a way to avoid loneliness, even if they had a mismatch in compatibility with me. Just to give some context as to just my life situation, I'm someone who grew up feeling as if there weren't a lot of people out there that would like or accept me for who I am. I would get bullied often for having a learning disability, as well as not having certain qualities that people wanted to see me, whether it's related to my socioeconomic status, my hobbies, my interests, my preferences for how I handle friendships, or even just the kind of boundaries that I wanted to have in my own life. Mostly just to protect and conserve my energy, for going out with people does drain my energy, so I want to be discerning with who I spend my time with as a way to protect myself, as well as be more picky with who do I allow in my life. Things that not a lot of people understand and sometimes would judge me for. And many more qualities along those lines. It's almost as if we judge each other based on whether or not we can hold each other to some arbitrary or overly idealistic standard of what makes a great person or friend, and so on and so forth. Even though we each have a unique set of qualities that are worth preserving and cultivating, that still in their own right makes us great people on an individual level. Doesn't mean that we're perfect, as there's probably still a lot for each of us to learn no matter where we are in our lives, but it does mean that in the name of personal growth and exploring ourselves, we should remember to always keep in sight the things we hold dear to us that makes us who we are. We can learn and adapt, but not lose these things. And some of these things are our hobbies, our own personality, what we want to see in the world, and ultimately the people that we love in our lives. Whether it be family or close friends of ours, or even lovers or partners and whatnot. As throughout my life, I found myself needing to conform in order to not only survive, but also to be accepted and welcomed by others. As I felt that I wasn't good enough to fit in anywhere due to the frequent bullying that I would receive, as well as feeling that I have so much that makes me different from other people that it was difficult for me to connect with other people. And I ended up just taking it in a negative way, which brought my sense of self-esteem down to the point where I felt that I had to lower my standards in order to fit in with what someone wanted from me, just so I can be accepted, find friends to talk to, and overall just avoid loneliness, which worked to an extent. As at first, I did get a couple of people to want to talk to me, for we would hang out together, exchange phone numbers, even got to experience some growth and change along the way, namely when it came to just connecting with people, such as giving me opportunities to practice my social skills with other people, caring for another, or even just learning some life skills that would prove later in my life to be highly useful and practical, such as learning how to be diplomatic, as there are people that may take things more seriously and might get easily offended, so it's important that when you disagree with someone, you modify your words just to be considerate of them as much as possible. Things like that really do acknowledge that even though these connections weren't perfect, they did provide some sense of opportunity and growth that I'm grateful for. However, as much as I gained a lot from these experiences, I realized that at some point, I have to be very discerning with who I choose to let into my life. Not only is there a need to protect myself from those that would take me for granted, but also there's that need to make sure I'm doing the best I can to be on the best path possible to getting personal success in my life. As I'm at a point now where I just don't want to be friends with everyone. I want to be friends with those who are all focused on healing, just enjoying the presence of another human being, through the good and the bad, people who embrace the duality of our existence, the fact that we're all multi-dimensional human beings with our unique set of traits, qualities, and interests. Like for me, I'm someone who enjoys rocking blonde hair and being creative and expressive with my work, whether it's through my photos from my smartphone of all things nature and life, whether it's all those cool pictures of food or just pictures of myself posing and at these wonderful places that I go to throughout the San Francisco Bay Area and beyond, or even just my podcast posts, or even the little graphics I design and publish there, where I talk about myself, talk about my thoughts, express them, and all these things that really express my creative side. At the same time, I also like to enjoy deep philosophical conversations about what it means to be human and to live in this messy yet beautiful world we call Earth, as well as other minor interests such as playing video games like Batman Arkham City, as I'm quite a big fan of superhero movies. I like Batman, I like Spider-Man, I like Guardians of the Galaxy, I even like anti-heroes such as Red Hood, or even characters along the lines of maybe even Deadpool, for instance. All of which seem disconnecting or just incompatible with each other, but they all express this duality that I have and all these different aspects of me that neither subtract from the other sides of me or are more superior to other sides, for they all equally play a role in forming this cohesive whole that's my identity and who I am as a person. Thus, given just my way of thinking, I feel it's important for me to move forward that I surround myself with people who don't just see one side of me, but acknowledge and accept that I am much more than those things that they see in me. That, to me, is what I believe is part of what friendship is. The ability to not just be able to have fun and be able to connect with one another, but to be able to see and experience each side of me, knowing that you can only fully understand me if you take a moment to see every part of me, through the good times and the tough times, through moments of fun and levity, and also moments of tenderness and honest sincerity. All these moments that reflect the contradictory yet duality of our existence, the dark and the light. Only then do we truly understand and love one another as human beings, for the depths of our identity are just as vast and mysterious as the universe we live in. So, that is it for me in this podcast. I want to say thank you all for listening. I do appreciate that you're all taking the time to listen to this podcast. And I want to say that if you all are interested in following up more with this podcast and you like what you hear, be sure to like and subscribe on whichever platform you get your podcast on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or Audible, or just wherever you get your podcasts. For social media, you can always follow me on Instagram at thepaideiac self, which is spelled ThePaideiacself, the Paideiac Self. You can also check out my link tree in the podcast description below, as well as in the bio of my Instagram page, where you get access to links where you can find out where my podcasts are available, as well as a link to my Instagram channel and also a link to my writings on medium.com, where I write short articles to complement the ideas and topics that I cover on this podcast and on Instagram. So do check out my posts there. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode of The Paideiac Self, which is coming out on October 14, 2023, and it will be the last episode of Season 1 of The Paideiac Self before I go on my long 1-year break. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a great day. So take care.